Let me explain to you about the questions. Grassroots America does not do drive-by type of candidate debates where everybody gets a 30-second soundbite and you walk away thinking you've just heard rhetoric and you don't know any more than when you arrived. What we're trying to do is style questions that will give each candidate an equal opportunity to reveal to you their core principles, their vision for the office, and sit in and talk to you about their differences as if you were interviewing them for a job. Because this is what this is. This is a job interview. And Grassroots America does not have a friendly incumbent rule. A lot of statewide organizations have what we call a friendly incumbent. So if we endorsed you last time, unless you did something really awful, we endorse you automatically. We don't care about your challenger. That's not what we do. Every single candidate that wants to present themselves on the ballot, incumbents even, are asking you to rehire them again. That's what this is about. So I hope that the questions that Grassroots will present tonight through our moderator will give these candidates an opportunity to reveal to you who they are and give you a good idea of whom you should vote for on March 4th to hire for this job. Okay? Thank you for being here. And we're going to start, as I said, with the district attorneys tonight, the candidates for DA, and then we will move quickly into the 321st District Judge Candidate Forum debate, and it will be the same rules involved in that as well. Thank you. You guys do the coin toss?
I'll defer. It's tails.
And the rules are whoever goes first here goes last in the other.
That is correct.
I'll go first.
Okay, now everybody have your cell phones off, and I will say to you candidates, what we're trying to do to help you tonight is we've got the time. It's going to count down on the wall back here. Everybody, the time is going to count down on the wall back here for the candidates so that they can see the time as it counts down, and I think they've probably noticed that by now. Thank you.
Well, I will.
Yes. I like your head, right?
Sure.
Is this on?
Give it a second.
Try it again.
Can you hear me? Hello?
It should be, once it's turned on, don't turn it off. It's about a 7-second delay.
Gotcha.
They're up there. There you go.
I'll talk loud.
No.
I'll probably mess it up.
What's the name on the mic?
Marie?
Marie.
Read her carefully.
They all have a name here.
Is it on? Is it on?
Is it on?
Is the switch on?
It's down at the bottom.
It should be on.
It's on.
It's on.
Okay.
Speak into it.
Hello? Well, I can talk loud. If everybody can hear me. Hello? Yes, it's on.
It's on now.
What do you want to do?
It's on now. It's on now.
It's good, I think.
They just turn the volume down.
Okay. Start whenever.
First of all, hello, Mike.
Yes, 1, 2, there we go. Thank you, 1, 2. First of all, I'd like to say thank you for this opportunity. Hello, mic test, 1, 2, 3, 4.
We can hear you.
Okay, all right. First of all, I'd like to say thank you for this opportunity to moderate this debate and to represent the part of our community that represents the grace of God for this community, and to moderate a very important function of our society, and that is to uphold the law of God, as all civil laws are based upon the Word of God. Also, as moderator, it is my job to maintain a civil discourse throughout the course of this debate, and I will inform all the candidates and those in the audience I have two methods to maintain that civil discourse, and they are both biblical. The first is the Elijah method, and I will call down fire from heaven. The second, if there is any mocking or any criticism on the part of the moderator and how he does his job, I will use the Elisha method, and that is when Elisha called 2 she-bears out of the woods and mauled 42 children for criticizing him for not having any hair. So with that, I welcome you to this debate, and tonight we have Matt Bingham, who is the incumbent, and Reeve Jackson, who is the challenger, and for your information, this race has no Democratic challenger for November. So Matt, you may begin.
Thank you. To Mrs. Fleming and all the members here, I really appreciate the opportunity to be here and tell you a little bit about myself and the office and answer questions regarding my office. My name is Matt Bingham. My wife, Ann, is here. We've been married 19 years. My daughter, Haley, she's 15 years old, and I've said before, she just got her learner's permit, so you're warned on that. I want to tell you that as I start off, I am very pro-life. Ann and I were blessed after much prayer to adopt Haley, and she has been a blessing to us. And I know every time that I see her, I truly know there is a God. He has blessed us with her. I've been a prosecutor for a little over 19 years, 18 of them here in Smith County. I've been the DA here for a little over 10 years, running this office and all aspects of the office. I've handled thousands, tens of thousands of cases, but I have tried to a jury 150 felony cases, 27 murders and capital murder cases to a jury. And in running this office, one of the things that is so important, especially under the conservative principles, is fiscal responsibility. Over the past 5 years, not only is our budget maintained, but we have turned back $701,000 that was allotted to us in our budget that we did not spend. We have, as budgets are tight, not only at the county level, but at the local level, we have been able to utilize forfeiture funds, about $400,000 just this year alone, to buy training, vehicles, dogs, things that the law enforcement can use in their duties to keep themselves safe and the public safe. We have an excellent working relationship with law enforcement, and I'm proud and honored to have the endorsement of the Tyler Patrolmen's Association. I love and I've been blessed to have the opportunity to go in the courtroom and fight for those victims. It's been a true honor, and that's why I do this job, to give them a voice, to hold the defendant accountable and protect this community that I love so much. And I want to tell you, thank you so much for allowing me to serve you in this county, the greatest county, in the greatest state, in the greatest country in the world. And I appreciate it.
Thank you. I feel kind of strange introducing myself to many of you because I know most of you. When this campaign started for us back in June of this year, my wife and I went out and started knocking on doors, and we've now knocked on the doors of almost 7,000 voters. And so I've had the chance to meet many of you on your own front doorstep. I've also met many of you at events just like this. And I want to tell you, I think it's important to have elected officials who are active, who attend events within the community, and who are paying attention to your cares and your concerns. And I'm glad I attend events like this because I wondered how to introduce myself, and I heard it 2 nights ago when Pastor Rafael Cruz was here, and I thought, hey, I'd steal from him. He does a pretty good job. And one of the things he said was, when it comes to selecting a candidate, the Bible tells us how to do it. Look at Exodus 18:21. And the first thing you want to do is find a candidate who loves the Lord. Well, I grew up here in Tyler, attended Marvin Methodist my entire life. In college and law school and in my adult life, I've had the opportunity to help build churches across the country and across the globe. I've had the opportunity to preach in pulpits both here in Tyler and as far away as Tomsk, Siberia. Second thing you have to do is find someone who loves the truth. And I've made a career for the past decade of standing up for citizens in front of a government that we know doesn't always have much care or concern for the truth. More importantly, though, I've had tough conversations with some of you, and I haven't run from problems that I knew and concerns that you would have. And when you've asked, why does your voting history look like Ronald Reagan's? I've explained it. And even in the hard times and the hard questions, I'm happy to have a truthful conversation with you. And the final thing you're supposed to look for is someone who hates covetousness. Well, coveting is most often seen in relationships, right? And I'm proud to say that I'm married to my wife, Laura, who's here. We've been married for 7 years, and I can tell you there is not another woman in the world I would covet next to her. She is fantastic. I am proud and fortunate to be married to her, and together we are looking for the opportunity to apply for this job so that we can serve the citizens of Smith County.
Thank you, gentlemen. Our first question for this evening. Please identify the greatest challenge the District Attorney's Office faces and describe how you plan to address it, and please be specific.
Thanks. There are several challenges facing the District Attorney's Office, but they're related. And I think the first biggest one is the budget. And I disagree with the comment that for the past 5 years, the budget has been consistent at its level. It hadn't. In fact, for 9 out of the 10 years that my opponent has been in office, the budget has increased every year. The budget is now 50% greater than it was when he took office. And let's put that into perspective. The 2 counties that are closest to us in terms of population size are Brazos and McLennan County. Now, per capita in McLennan County, citizens pay $16 a person for their district attorney's office. In Brazos County, they're paying $14 a person for their district attorney's office. Here in Smith County, we're paying $18 a person. Now, what does that $2 or $4 difference mean? Well, when you put it in terms of the population of Smith County, about 200,000 people, that's $500,000 more every year that we're paying for our district attorney's office. That's $500,000 that doesn't go to police officers. It's $500,000 that doesn't go to road and bridge. It's $500,000 that has been pulled out unnecessarily to our district attorney's office. So budget is one big area. Another big area we've got to talk about is illegal immigration. We can't rely on Washington to take care of it. We can't rely on Austin to take care of it. And we cannot let Smith County become a sanctuary county. And here in this county, for too long, we have put too many illegal immigrants on probation, released them right back into our community after they have come here and committed violent offenses, brought drugs into our community, some of the most heinous cases you're going to see, and we turn around and we reward them with the greatest gift we have, which is the opportunity to live in this country, and I think that needs to stop. By addressing illegal immigration, we're tying back into that first issue of the budget. Obviously, we know what that's costing our county and our community. Compliment Sheriff Larry Smith. He's taken a proactive approach to trying to get immigration issues recognized from the moment people walk into his jail. We need a district attorney's office that can follow up on that same issue. And so I think those two are probably the 2 biggest issues facing our DA's office currently.
Mr. Bingham, do you have?
Well, the budget is always something that's very important, and I don't know that, and I will say in our office, it runs really well. We have, and I see a lot of my prosecutors out here and my support staff, which I appreciate them coming. I have an excellent staff. The budget, I disagree with Mr. Jackson on what he said about the budget. In 2009, our budget was $3.5 million. We spent $3.4 with a savings of $164,000 that we turned back to the county. In 2013, in 2010, our budget was $3.89 million. This last year, our budget was $3.84. We have maintained a very fiscally responsible budget, and I would challenge any county with the number of cases that we have in this county, which is higher than our contiguous counties, the number of violent crimes that we prosecute. We are a county that is aggressive in our prosecution of cases. Since 2009, we have turned back $701,596 that was allotted to us in our budget that we did not spend and were able to turn back to the county. And in talking about fiscal responsibility, in addition to that, in 2010, the county was in a fiscal crunch. The county was having a hard time meeting the budget that it had set. When we had a receptionist that left, an investigator that left, and a prosecutor that left, we didn't fill those positions. We froze those positions. which saved the salary, the retirement, the benefits, the insurance for those 3 individuals. We had people that absorbed those positions. In 2013, when our theft by check, which we still collect a lot of money in theft by checks, but it gets less and less as debit cards come along. When that person left, we took that job and filled finally our receptionist position, which paid about half that. So for 3 years, we absorbed that job. We did improvements to the office in 2010 in showing the fiscal responsibility.
Joanne, the time it should be 3 minutes, correct?
No, it's a 15-minute segment for each of these questions, and I'm watching it. So that clock back there is just to give them an idea of the countdown. Okay? So, sorry. Proceed.
That's okay. We had mold in the office. It was coming down the ceilings, the walls, the carpet. We didn't go to the commissioner's court and ask for those repairs. We took money that we had seized from criminals in forfeiture cases and improved our office with that forfeiture money. The budget is always an important issue facing any office with the number of employees we have, which is 47 employees right now. And it's always an important issue. I think something that I'm becoming more aware of that I think is very important, and it goes along with securing the borders, is the sex trafficking issue. The sex trafficking issue is something that I'm becoming more aware of as Mrs. Fleming has held these seminars on it to show, and I think that's something, and I don't know how much time I have to go into it, but I think that is an important issue facing this case, facing this office. Something we need to be more aware of, and we are becoming more aware of it and looking for it to prosecute those offenders, but realize that sometimes those people arrested are actually victims of the sex trafficking, these sex trafficking crimes. Our office runs great. It really does.
And if I could address some of that, sorry to interrupt, but on the issue of returning money, I'll give him credit for that. At the end of the year, he's given back money that he didn't spend. But to me, that's not good money management. That's poor budgeting. Asking for more money than you need costs taxpayers, and it costs every department of the county when they have to up front send money to the district attorney's office that doesn't go to Road and Bridge, that doesn't go to law enforcement. That giving it back, that's great, but it is not good budgeting. The district attorney's office, like almost every other office in our county, suffers from a failure to do zero-based budgeting. And you know, you don't ask for what you want, you ask for what you need, and you identify dollar for dollar where that money's going to go. I don't want to sound like a salesman here, but one of the best things my wife and I ever did for our personal relationship was Dave Ramsey's Financial Peace University. And if you're familiar with Dave Ramsey, I believe his policies and procedures can work fantastic in government. And that is simply, we don't do debt, we don't spend more than we have, and every dollar that comes in has a name and a place where it's going before it's spent. That not only makes your budgeting better, but it increases transparency. Everybody ought to be able to go to the district attorney's office website, pull up a copy of the budget, and see dollar for dollar where your money is being spent. Well, and I'm just curious why we haven't done that in the past.
Well, let me respond to one of the things he said. I think it's everyone that is in an elected position has to be fiscally responsible. As part of that, you have to look at your budget each year and try to determine what your needs are going to be. With the number of cases we have, with the types of cases we're prosecuting, you look at the budget you have this year and say, we anticipate we're going to need this budget this year. And every year, our budget has remained pretty much the same. But what we try to do in addition to that is if we don't have to spend it, we don't. And I think to make the argument that somehow you're not fiscally responsible because you're giving back money is the wrong argument. I think the fact you're giving back money in a budget that you anticipate shows that you are fiscally responsible. And in addition to that, taking this money that we seize from criminals and turning it back to law enforcement so they don't have to go back to their city councils, their county governments and ask for more money is very prudent. And it saves the taxpayers this year alone, and what I've given back, over $500,000. We were able to give to Sheriff Larry Smith, who we have a great working relationship with, 6 vehicles. radios in those vehicles, 2 dogs that are tracking dogs, protection dogs, drug sniffing dogs that were like $30,000. The radios in the cars were $40,000 alone. Those 6 cars probably valued at $120,000 to give the training to the sheriff's department that they needed. And I think that's very fiscally responsible.
But
And I think that, one second, and I think that's something that's important to the people, because Larry Smith didn't have to go back to the county and ask for that money. And that's not something the DA's office has to do. That comes out of my 30% of the 100% that we seize. But it's something that we like to do to give back to law enforcement, to keep them safe, the community safe, and help the taxpayers.
But I think what gets left out of this car story to the sheriff is the vehicles he gave the sheriff were the DA investigators' used cars. He then went out and bought a fleet of brand new Chevy Tahoes for the district attorney's office, which poses a couple issues to me. Number one, why does the district attorney's office need 7 Chevy Tahoes, an entire fleet of vehicles, more than any office of comparable size? But more importantly, why are we going to ask our officers who are on the front lines, risking their lives, to drive used vehicles in the dark, lonely parts of our county when the district attorney, their office, clearly has enough money to buy new vehicles for the sheriff? Why doesn't, if those cars are still good enough for sheriff's deputies, why are they not good enough for the district attorney's office? Why do we not give our first responders first priority on equipment that we're going to buy?
Well, I can answer that. Because I have 7 investigators that have statewide jurisdiction that are on the street constantly. And it's really kind of amazing that you can come in and when the sheriff says, I'd sure like to have those vehicles.
Thank you, Matt. Our time is up on that question. Our second question, for the sake of this debate, imagine the state of Texas took seriously the internal enforcement of the rule of law as it applies to those who are here illegally. Internal enforcement means upholding the state's constitutional authority and mandate to protect the life, liberty, and property of its citizens and legal residents. Please describe why you do or do not support an effective program for identifying illegal aliens who come in contact with any county entity. Please include in your response your knowledge of the Department of Public Safety's 2013 threat assessment. Matt, you may start.
Well, you know, the illegal immigrant problem, I think, is prevalent anywhere. We certainly have one here, like I think everyone does, because if you have one illegal immigrant committing crimes, it's something you have to address. You know, when we had the shooting of Trooper Stone, Steve Stone, going around the loop by 2 illegal immigrants that were here, had come back into the country, were actually collecting benefits from the United States, even though they were here illegally, and shot Trooper Stone. We didn't just prosecute them and turn them back on the street like Mr. Jackson says. When we went into trial, we prosecuted them for the shooting of Trooper Stone, for all the ag assaults they committed going around the loop. And by the time it was done, they had 4 stacked life sentences and were not eligible for parole for 120 years. Because we do take very serious the problem of illegal immigrants in this county. We identify, and I've had a investigator of mine that has served on the Homeland Security Task Force. We notify, his name is HK, but and I know his Fleming knows him, over at the Office of Homeland Security every time we have someone arrested who is an illegal immigrant. You know, it's something that we do take very seriously. I do believe firmly that we have to secure our borders. I believe the resources that we have in the United States are meant for the citizens of the United States. I think that with that illegal immigrant, as I've talked about, comes other problems, like the sex trafficking. They do victimize our citizens here in the United States, and we do everything we can to prosecute them, convict them, and for them to be deported. You know, so we do work with the federal agencies on their deportation, do notify them. I'm aware of the DPS 2013 threat assessment, but not enough details that I can sit here and discuss it with you at this point.
Well, I think one of the main things to be aware of in that threat assessment is it talks about the fact that In simplest terms, the dangers of the border are moving north. And you're seeing places like the Houston area, like DFW, becoming a hub for not just illegal immigration, but home bases this side of the border for drug cartels and all of the violence, sex trafficking, drugs and guns that they bring with them. It's a very real problem, and it's not a real problem hundreds of miles away in Brownsville. It's a real problem an hour and a half down the road, straight down interstate in the Dallas area. And it's something that, as I mentioned earlier, it's got to be addressed. And I will grant you, you're going to find cases where somebody commits a terrible crime and they're an illegal immigrant and they get prosecuted. That, to me, though, isn't the issue. The issue is, what are we doing with the majority of those illegal immigrants who are brought into our criminal justice system? And for the most part, they are released back on probation or given minimal sentences. It is commonplace to see in our courts drug offenders, felony drug offenders, receive probation, and not just any probation, a deferred probation, which, if you're not familiar, means that they're walking out of there without a conviction on their record. And the lack of that conviction is important because it makes them easier to track this side of the border, and it makes it more difficult for them to re-enter the country. Additionally, if they re-enter the country illegally after having been convicted of a felony offense, there are stiffer federal penalties, and the odds of them being deported again increase. And we know it's hard to get the federal government to do what they should, so we got to give them every reason to take care of their business. I think that a great example of the problem we're facing with illegal immigrants here in our community and the way it's been handled improperly is Simon Lopez. And if that name sounds familiar to y'all, it's a capital murder case here in Smith County just a year or two ago. But the story doesn't start a year or two ago. The story actually starts back in 2007 when Simon Lopez, an illegal immigrant, commits unlawful carrying of a weapon, illegally had a firearm in our county. And he was put on a deferred probation and put back on the street. He also had, I'll give you a chance to respond.
Well, let me address.
He also had a possession of marijuana case, which he was put on a deferred probation for. He violated his probation, and by agreement with the district attorney's office, he was kept on probation until he committed additional violations. And at that point, he was revoked and given a short sentence, put back on the street. In 2010, he committed an assault that this district attorney's office dismissed. Then in 2011, he committed a terrible offense when he beat an 18-month-old child until the life was gone from that baby. Committed a capital murder offense. Imagine if we had done our job in 2007.
Yeah, let me tell you a little bit about Simon Lopez and the rest of the story. Simon Lopez, the assaults that he committed were against other gang members, and those gang members were not cooperative. One of those gang members could not be located. One of the gang members had a Fifth Amendment right not to testify and would not cooperate in the case. And that's the very real part that Mr. Jackson didn't tell you. Sometimes when the victim in a case has a Fifth Amendment right out of their own case, I can't compel their testimony. When they're not cooperative, you can't prosecute sometimes. But I'll tell you what we did do with Mr. Lopez is work with Homeland Security to track him down in Mexico. And we brought him back from Mexico to stand trial in Smith County. We didn't let him go to Mexico and throw our hands up, and we brought him back here, and he's convicted of capital murder now, doing a life sentence without parole. That's the rest of the story on Simon Lopez. What Mr. Jackson isn't talking about are the 27 murders and capital murder convictions that I have with the 6 people on death row. And I'm sure we'll get to that coming up. But that's the rest of the story on Simon Lopez.
Don't look over here where there's a problem. Let's talk about capital murders that I have handled. That wasn't the question, and that's not the issue. The issue is, what do we do about illegal immigration? And I'm proud that our district attorney's office, after a capital murder was convicted, tracked him down in Mexico and brought him back. But he never should have reached that point. Even if you ignore the assault that was dismissed, even if there were issues with that case, there were still 2 other criminal offenses, including unlawfully carrying a firearm and a drug offense in this community where immigration was not handled the way it should have been, and if it was, we don't get to the capital murder.
Simon Lopez was born in Corpus Christi.
If I could have a second.
Simon Lopez is not an illegal immigrant. Also, Simon Lopez is born in Corpus Christi.
you had extensive hearings involving the Mexican consulate because Mexico claimed him as a citizen.
No, that's not what it was. The question was whether he'd been deported or not deported. Even an American citizen that goes to Mexico, you have to go through Department of Justice and the Office of International Affairs to get them back. Simon Lopez was born in Texas, but the question was still whether or not he'd been deported or whether they had kicked him out without the proper hearings. Simon Lopez was not an illegal immigrant. I mean, I don't know if people know that or not. This is a man born in Corpus Christi, but we still had to address those issues with Mexico. And that's something that the defense was going to raise, saying he had not had the proper hearings for deportation. I mean, just to clarify, he's not an illegal immigrant. He was born in Corpus.
That's not the argument you made at trial, and that's not the hearings that were held in
We didn't have a
court.
trial.
But the hearings,
have a trial.
the pretrial hearings on that immigration issue.
No, the issues that were raised by the defense in that case was whether or not he had had the proper hearings that were to be guaranteed him by the Mexican government.
Can you explain why you're putting other illegal immigrants on probation? Can you explain?
Well, yeah, I can tell you this, and you know, we have. If you can give me specifics, and I can probably tell you the case, but I can tell you this: every time we have an illegal immigrant, we notify Homeland Security. And you know, the problem is what Mr. Jackson's not telling you is that many of the cases that where they get probation, if they do, are mandatory by law. Whether they're illegal or not illegal.
There is no law that requires the district attorney's office by agreement to put somebody on a deferred probation. And the first condition of any probation is what? Do not violate the laws of the United States. So when that person walks out of the courthouse on probation, if you had to put him on probation, and he walks out of the courthouse on probation, what is he doing from day one? Violating the laws of the United States. That's grounds to revoke his probation. It is not enough to notify Homeland Security. We have to be proactive on this issue. We have to stop rewarding people.
Is he saying he goes into a court of law and a judge on the bench puts him on probation, and then after the judge puts him on probation, we're supposed to then go revoke him because he walked out of the courthouse on the probation the judge just put him on?
I'm saying if our judges are not strong enough to enforce the law, we need a district attorney who is.
Well, our judges here do a great job. And, you know, I mean, our judges here make the decisions they make based on the evidence and the law. But, you know, you really have to understand the whole process and the fact that if they are charged with a possession of a controlled substance, that's a state jail felony. I can't go in and circumvent the law and make them go to the penitentiary when the law says it's mandatory probation. And if the judge puts him on gives him probation, I can't then go revoke him under some federal he's here illegal. What we notify is Homeland Security.
Actually, you can. And your office,
No,
in the case of
you can't.
Gutierrez versus State, was admonished by the Court of Criminal Appeals, the highest criminal appellate court in the state, for failing to properly handle revocations with illegal immigrants. I'm telling you, we can fix this problem. It needs to be addressed, and it's time we had somebody who could get in there and do it and not make excuses and not hide behind some law that says, oh, I had to put him on a deferred probation, because there is no such law. It
There
doesn't
absolutely
exist.
is. Are you saying that there is not a mandatory probation for a state jail felony drug offense?
There are a requirement that the judge place somebody on probation. The district attorney's office never has to agree to it, and there is no
If the law
requirement.
says that the judge is required to put him on probation, I'm going to follow the law.
Most district attorney's offices across the state do not enter into plea bargain agreements with illegal immigrants for probation.
Understand what he's
It
saying.
is the judge's job, and if the judge does that, but that's not even what's happening.
Let me
You
say-
are
let me-
placing people on a deferred probation by agreement. That's not the law. You're saying you can come to our country,
do y'all
commit
understand
crimes,
what
and
he's
walk
saying
out
right
without
here?
a conviction.
Do y'all, let me just stop. Do you understand what he's trying to sell, the spin he's trying to put on this? He's saying even though the law mandates it and the judge is required to do it, you don't have to go in there and agree to it. I mean, that's what he's telling you. Do y'all see through that? Because if the law requires it, I'm not going to go into court and pretend that that's not the law. I mean, I hope y'all understand kind of
And
where
there
he's coming
is
from.
no
now.
law that requires you to agree to it, but more importantly,
There's no law that requires me to agree
in a
to it, but
majority
there
of these
is.
cases, you have put them on by agreement, a deferred
I
probation with
disagree
no
with
conviction.
you. I think it's easy to get up here and say, you've done this in the majority of cases. I disagree. We are very aware when we have an illegal immigrant that he's here illegally. And we tried to obtain sentences that's going to result in his deportation, like getting more than a year in jail. I mean, that's something we try to do. Inevitably, one thing that I hope y'all understand is we can't make someone get a sentence. A sentence is determined by a trier of fact that is either a judge or a jury. No plea bargain we enter into is binding on the judge. And I'm not trying to shift responsibility, but I'll tell you this. If the law says that he has to get probation and the judge has to give probation, then we're going to follow the law in the case. If there's something we can do to get him convicted and get him deported, we're going to do that. And the thing is, we realize that we have illegal immigrants here, and with illegal immigrants coming up the Houston corridor, for instance, which is part of that 2013 threat assessment, and up that Houston corridor with the sex trafficking issues. We realize that, but we're going to follow the law in the case. We want the illegal immigrants deported. We want the borders secure, but we're going to follow the law.
It's as simple as this. If you think your district attorney should be agreeing to put people who are here in this country illegally committing felony offenses on probation, should be rewarding them without a conviction, there's your candidate. If elected, I will not, and you will not, have a district attorney who enters into plea agreements with people in this country illegally committing felony offenses for probation, for deferred probation. We will not reward them. People that commit crimes in America deserve to receive American justice.
Well, I'll tell you, if you want a district attorney that's going to follow the law, that's me. If you want a district attorney that has tried, and one of the things that comes up is the trial experience. It's easy to go in and talk about plea bargains. How about the jury trial experience? Because experience matters. I have 150 felony jury trials, 27 murder and capital murder convictions.
Thank you, gentlemen. Our time is up for that question. Our third question for the evening, given the trend in more states legalizing marijuana, please describe what impact you foresee for our county, our culture, law enforcement, and the criminal justice system.
Well, let me say first, I am not in favor of legalizing marijuana. And I'll tell you why. I have seen people who have used marijuana for extended periods of time. I've represented them, and they all have one trait in common. And that is they tell you the same stories over and over. And they forget what you told them 15, 20 minutes ago. I believe marijuana is a dangerous drug. It's not healthy. I don't think we should legalize it. But at the same time, I believe our criminal justice system creates punishments for that offense out of proportion to what it actually is. We take college kids who make bad decisions, who get arrested with a small amount of personal use marijuana, and we give them a slap on the wrist misdemeanor conviction. And we think we've done something. And we have. We just don't know what we've done. Because you see, as soon as somebody's convicted for that misdemeanor marijuana offense, that college kid, he loses eligibility for scholarships, he loses eligibility for federal loans and grants, and for the rest of his life, he has a conviction that will follow him and brand him as a drug user. I think that these are appropriate areas to look for rehabilitative efforts. And the great thing about those efforts is they're self-funding, meaning the people that are involved in these programs are required to work, they're required to pay into it, and counties across Texas are using these programs to reduce their budget by having offenders pay for the program. And more importantly, they're reducing their crime rate because we're having people learn to make better life choices and get off of these drugs, the marijuana in particular. Certainly there are harder drugs with different issues, but I'm not in favor of legalizing it. I am, however, in favor of reforming the way we treat it.
That's one thing we agree on. I'm not in favor of legalizing marijuana. We have cases where college students are found in possession of marijuana, and that's where the discretion of the district attorney's office and the prosecutors comes into play. And my prosecutor's sitting back there. We understand that there are people that screw up, and there are screw-ups, period. You have people that come in that had some marijuana, they're in college, it's going to have a dramatic effect on their lives if they get that conviction. And we take that into consideration, but we want them to get the treatment they need and go on probation, not have the conviction that will affect them for the rest of their life. We also have marijuana cases, like the one that I tried, 10, 12, maybe longer years ago that occurred down by UT Health and Science Center where a man was meeting some drug dealers. It was 50 pounds of marijuana. One of them brought, the older gentleman brought his granddaughter to the location. The gunfire was exchanged and she was shot in the foot with an AK-47. And the very real dangers of marijuana is that it is a danger for the community. It's a danger for law enforcement that has to arrest these individuals. With marijuana does come very real problems. It does bring that element. So, you know, you have both facets of that. You have the college student or the young person that maybe needs a second chance if he's caught with a small amount of marijuana, but to get treatment, to make sure that this is not a choice that he makes again. You have other individuals that need to be prosecuted harshly because they are bringing this drug war to the community and on the community streets. And I did try him, and I did convict all 4 of those individuals. And it was so much marijuana, when we brought it into the 114th, the jury started rubbing their eyes. Their eyes were watering. It was so much marijuana and that smell coming off of it. Because it is a dangerous drug. From the perspective, for sure, on law enforcement that has to make the arrests, for the drug dealers that bring those weapons with them. And so I'm not in favor of legalizing marijuana. I am in favor of giving those people who are young, who have made a bad decision, a second chance in the form of a deferred probation, counseling, and treatment. I am in favor of aggressively prosecuting those people who transport and traffic marijuana because it is a very real danger for law enforcement in the community.
Follow up on what Matt said when he started. I think we can chalk this one up to a tie. You're not going to find much difference between the two of us on this issue.
All right, then we'll go to question 4. Please list the top 3 programs or projects that would be your focus in the upcoming term. Describe why they are important and the funding issues associated with each of them. Matt?
Well, I think one of the things that I think is I'd like to see, and I talked to...
Use the microphone.
I'm sorry.
You're fine.
I apologize. And I'll start with this one. Like I mentioned before, the sex trafficking issue. Making the community aware, helping law enforcement become aware that this is a problem that we do have in Smith County. It's a problem everywhere. And being able to identify it, realizing that some of the, like in a case we just had where a young lady was arrested in a hotel room. There was some dope in the hotel room. She was arrested, and she had charges out of other counties, and I had talked to the prosecutors in Fort Worth, but realizing that, and we were able to show that she is in fact a victim of sex trafficking. Because on the surface, a lot of times it looks like the one arrested is the defendant. Everybody focuses on charges for that individual, not understanding that she herself may be a victim of the sex trafficking. It's not just females; it's males as well. So, you know, raising more awareness with law enforcement in the community on the sex trafficking issue, to me, would be the top project. One of the other things that I talked about was trying to. We do, in Smith County, we have had a gang problem, and the gang problem, back in 1995, I could tell you the East Side Locos, the Norteños, the Graveyard Crips, the St. Louis Crips, and go through all those gangs with you. One of the things that the PD had was a gang task force. They did their job so well that 95 drive-by shootings dropped down to only 2 the next year, and that was disbanded. I would like to see, one of the things I would like to see is a real aggressive approach, and we've had one. I've spent virtually a career prosecuting the Chapel Hill Hoover 5 Deuce Crips. When we can identify gangs and the crimes they're committing, we're very aggressive in the prosecution of those gangs. But I would like to see a task force that targets those gangs specifically. And for me, those are the 2 top projects that I would like to see. The budgeting part of the sex trafficking is really, Mrs. Fleming's been very good about bringing that to the public forum and the budgeting issue, bringing that to the public, is the cost of a seminar. And I've paid for detectives and law enforcement to go to those seminars. But it's not a big budgetary issue. The people in our community are out there wanting to get that message out, and it's not an expensive thing to do. The project with gangs is something that I've talked to Gary Swindle about, and they're having actually a gang resource officer come on board at the PD. There are grants for that, so it's not a big budgetary issue. It's just something that I think, and I think the PD is doing a great job. We have one officer that's going to be dedicated to it. Chris Miller's there already, helping to identify these gang members, the gang signs, come to testify in court. So it's not a budgetary issue. It's just getting it going and getting the message out there.
The three most important things that I'd want to address. Number one, the budget sort of encompasses all of it, and I think that you can't talk about adding a program, removing a program, changing a program without talking about the budgetary impact. But within that context, the three most important things to address are immigration, the sex trafficking issue, and ending the reversals of convictions in Smith County. Now, we've already covered a lot on immigration, so I'm going to skip that for the moment. Matt touched on the sex trafficking issue a little bit, and I think we need to do more. I live in Lindale. It's where I grew up, where my wife and I moved back to, and so every day I drive home on 69, and I go through that intersection there at the Loop and 69, and I see the Economy Inn and some of those hotels. And I'll tell you, if you want to have your eyes open to what's going on in our community, drive up to those hotels or the gas stations nearby and park there from about midnight to 4:30 in the morning, and just watch who's coming in and out of those hotels. And I think you're going to be amazed, frightened, and disappointed about the age and number of young girls walking in and out of those hotels. It's a very serious problem, and I compliment Sheriff Larry Smith, Tyler Police Department are both working on it. And our local U.S. Attorney's Office, FBI, and Homeland Security are also involved. I think our District Attorney's Office needs to take a leadership role. I couldn't help but feel a little ill when I heard Matt talk about, well, you need to remember that these girls that commit crimes, some of them are also victims. I recently represented a young girl, 14-year-old girl, who was working in the Economy Inn there at the Loop in 69 for a group out of Houston. They doped her up for about a week, where she was repeatedly raped. When she finally snapped, they drove her to her grandmother's house here in Tyler, kicked her out in the front yard, and left her half dressed and high. And when her grandmother came out to save her, she was in a distraught state. She was swinging her arms, kicking, assaulted her grandmother. Grandmother calls the police for help, and my opponent's office prosecuted that young girl. And I sat down with Taylor Heaton, the juvenile prosecutor, and he and I both talked about the issues at play, and we looked for alternative solutions, but at the end of the day, his office's policy was to prosecute that child. I don't think that's right. I think we need to take a leadership role in the overall problem, and we need to find resources for these young girls, not saddle them with family violence convictions. The third thing I think we need to address is we need to end the reversal rate in Smith County. What I'm talking about here is we do a good job of getting convictions, and this office has a great rate of conviction. But those convictions go up on appeal, and conservative courts, the Court of Criminal Appeals, which is regularly held to be one of the most conservative criminal courts in the entire country, reverses these convictions because of mistakes that the District Attorney's Office has made. Those mistakes include ethical violations, where they have failed to turn over exculpatory evidence, where they have hidden evidence. They include ethical violations where prosecutors have engaged in misconduct in the courtroom, and they include situations that are just flat-out ignorance of the law and shouldn't be happening. Now, we have some...
I'm going to respond
Matt,
to that.
I gave you a full 5 minutes, so if I could have...
I'll let you have it, but I'm going to respond to what you just said about ethical violations.
One of the things that needs to happen, and we've got some great people in that office, he's not kidding, but they need to have better resources and better training. We need to become one of the offices in Texas that is made up of board-certified lawyers. These are the only lawyers that are recognized criminal experts. I am board-certified in criminal trial law. I'm board-certified in criminal appellate law. We need to join those communities who have required their attorneys to become experts. We have the prosecutors who can do it with the right resources, but they haven't been given the support and the opportunity to do so. The advanced training that board certification requires, the advanced education the type and the scope of experience means you know what you're doing. And that's why, under state law, they're the only lawyers who can be referred to or call themselves experts in any given area. And I can say I am an expert in criminal trial law, an expert in criminal appellate law. We need an office full of experts, and we can make that happen.
Let me respond to one thing. I don't knock his board certification, but I want you to understand, a board certification is a 6-hour test. The requirements are 5 felony jury trials, 10 misdemeanors, with 25% of your practice dedicated to criminal law. It's a great thing. But what I want to tell you is it's not a substitute for experience. And even under the ABA rules, and you're not supposed to call yourself an expert, you're supposed to say you specialize. Because how can you be an expert in something you've never done? He's never tried a murder or a capital murder. He's never sat in front of a jury and explained the 3 special issues. When he was down getting his board certification in 2010, I was spending 1,500 hours preparing on the DeMontrell Miller case that I tried for 14 weeks in the beating death of a 2-year-old. And DeMontrell Miller's on death row right now. He's never done that. How can you be an expert in something you've never done? And I'll tell you about the appeals. Mr. Jackson is paid $6,500 a month, and it's his job by the county to file appeals on behalf of criminal defendants. And that's fine. I'm not throwing a dart at it for that. He has filed 346 appeals since he's been doing them here. Did you know that we have a 96% affirmation rate? That means we win 96% of the time. And I could go through the stats with you, but I'll tell you this, he has had 8 cases reversed since he's been filing those appeals in, 2008? 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, in 6 years. And do you know of those 8 appeals, 5 of them were court error, something the judge did. 3 of them were for something a prosecutor did or didn't do. 3 in that amount of time. I would put that up against any office's rate of having their cases affirmed. 346 he's filed. Only 8 have been reversed, and only 3 for something a prosecutor did or didn't do. My office is extremely ethical.
Let's do that. Let's put them up against other counties.
Let me respond to your ethical concerns. And I'll tell you, because I believe in putting it on the table. I'll tell you this. Our office is as ethical as any office in the state of Texas. We had one case, a Mineola Swingers Club case, that they like to bring up from 2008, where a Texas Ranger did an interview, and when the prosecutor asked him, "Did you learn anything new?" they said, "No." And what was contained in that interview, whether it was recorded or not, we were never ever able to find out because the prosecutor's not in the interview. That was an interview of the Swingers Club, the lady that owned the Swingers Club. And what she said was, "I don't see any kids, I never saw any kids in my Swingers Club." Well, that one statement should have been turned over to the defense, but it wasn't. And it was not intentional on the prosecutor's part. But we are held to that standard of turning stuff over even if law enforcement's aware of it.
It wasn't just that one interview. And I'd invite all of you, if you want to look at the Mineola Swingers case, there's plenty of information online about it. You can read the court opinions, and you can find what the extent of the evidence that was at issue in that case.
That was one case. And those defendants came in and pled guilty, because Mr. Jackson represented one of them. And they pled guilty to injury to a child for the conduct that they were originally charged for.
Thank you, gentlemen. That is the end of our time for that question. It comes to the close of our debate. We will now end with each candidate giving a 3-minute closing. And since Mr. Bingham started, then Mr. Jackson, you may be first with your closing statements.
I want to make this easy since it's become an issue. You know, numbers don't lie. Politicians do. People that have something to hide do, but the numbers don't. Let's take a look at this budget. Here we are in fiscal year 2005. Here we are today. We've gone from a budget of just over $2.5 million to almost $4 million. Again, compare it to people, our nearest neighbors. They're paying $14 a person, $16 a person. We're paying $18. What does that mean? An extra $500,000 to $1 million out of your pocket, out of the sheriff's pocket, out of our road and bridge program, going to support what? To support illegal immigrants getting put on probation, being rewarded with deferred probation. It goes to support an office with a high rate of reversals. You just heard Mr. Bingham tell you he's thrilled about only 4% of their cases have been reversed. Well, did you know that the state average, less than 1% of appeals are successful? Puts that 4% in context. I think that having any cases reversed is too much. It shouldn't happen, and it sure shouldn't happen for ethical misconduct. Mineola wasn't the only time it's happened. There was a case, for a felony case, a methamphetamine dealer who was convicted, and the Court of Criminal Appeals reversed that conviction. Why? Because the first assistant engaged in what they called highly inappropriate conduct, misled, misused, had false evidence that never should have been admitted and used by his office. That conviction got reversed, and the relationship with the first assistant is one you need to be familiar with, because after that reversal, he turned around and made her the highest paid employee in the county. We're paying our first assistant over $140,000 a year. That's more than the big counties pay. That's more than any comparable county pays, and look what we're getting as a return on that investment. I know I've had the opportunity to speak with many of you, and I appreciate it. I'm guessing, you're going to hear at some point, and most of you have already, yes, I, like Ronald Reagan, have voted in some Democratic primaries. When I was younger, 14 years ago almost, I was part of a Democratic group in law school. But what happened? I met my wife, a lifelong conservative Republican. I came back, worked for conservative causes. I'm the only candidate in this race who was one of the first 10 people to show up in Smith County and support Ted Cruz. I'm the only candidate in this race who has knocked on doors for the state representative who challenged Wendy Davis. I am the only candidate in this race who has marched in Austin with other pro-lifers against Wendy Davis's filibuster. I'm the only candidate in this race that traveled to Williamson County to fight Obama and turn Texas blue in 2008. Yeah, his voting history may look better than mine, but my principles outweigh his politics. And it is on principle that I'm asking you to give me your vote for district attorney.
Thank you. Mr. Bingham.
Thank you. One of the things, as I close, I again want to thank you all very much for the opportunity to be here. When you look at, one of the things I want to end with is experience does matter. I was fortunate enough to have some quotes from district attorneys that were unsolicited, that came to me. One was from Chris Martin. He texted to me. I didn't find it for a month, or emailed it. And it said, as a newly elected DA in Van Zandt County, I've relied on Matt's advice, insight regarding numerous issues ranging from the prosecution of capital murder cases to budgetary planning. Michael Jimerson in Rusk County said, we often have to rely on the experience of other prosecutors who have served as lead attorneys in previous capital murder cases. When we had a brutal torture and capital murder case in Rusk County, we called on Matt Bingham. His experience could not be replaced. He has set the standard that victims, law enforcement, and the public applaud as justice in Texas. Danny Buck Davidson, who's the Panola County Criminal District Attorney, he said the Smith County District Attorney's Office is the model office that so many of us try to emulate. The people of Smith County are fortunate to have someone with Matt's trial experience and expertise as a lawyer as their district attorney. Experience matters. We have 10 murder and capital murder cases, 10 capital murders and 6 murder cases pending in this county. And as I close this, I want to ask you, if you had a family member that was brutalized, who would you want trying the case? Someone who had never done one, or someone who's done 27 convicted? I've never lost. And I'll tell you this, I do it ethically. And every day I go in to decide, and when you have to make that decision of whether or not to seek a death penalty, wouldn't you want someone who had actually done one? We have an ethical office, a hardworking office, a fiscally responsible office. We have an office that has supported law enforcement, that has the endorsements of law enforcement. I have the endorsement of the Tyler Patrolmen's Association. I've been here 18 years. committed to the job I do because I believe in what I do. I started from the ground up in this office, prosecuting in the Justice of the Peace Court, to work my way up to where I am right now. And Mr. Jackson does have a Democratic voting record. I wasn't actually going to bring it up, but since he did, I'll bring it up. Because he voted in 2000, 2002, 2006, 2008, and 2010 in the Democratic primaries. He was president of the Texas Tech Law School Democrats in 2002, 3, and 4.
Thank you, Mr. Bennett. Your time is up. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you, candidates. Are the trial courts of general jurisdiction of Texas. The geographical area served by each court is established by the legislature, but each county must be served by at least one district court. In sparsely populated areas of the state, several counties may be served by a single district court, while an urban county may be served by many district courts. Smith County currently has 4 district courts. The 321st District Court, which is on the March 4th Republican primary ballot and uncontested in November, is designated to hear only family law cases, while the other 3 district courts hear only civil and criminal matters. Mr. Jarvis won the toss, and he will go first.
My name is John Jarvis, and I'm running for the judge for the 321st Judicial Court. Because I'm running because I feel at this time I've been called to run. I'm a 5th generation Smith County resident, and my father, Ben Jarvis, is here, and I've watched him, I didn't see him, but he served as your state representative from 1959 to 1963 in the seat and position that is currently held by Matt Schaefer. So I believe I've been mentored my life to serve. I think at this time, this court needs my unique skill set. I'm an attorney, I'm a CPA, and I'm a parent. And I think those are important combinations in any family law situation. I practiced law in this county for 17 years, and I've practiced family law as well as criminal law. And I've had in excess of 750 family law cases in addition to doing my other work. I'm also a certified public accountant. After graduating from Baylor University in 1989, I worked in public accounting and until such time as I did go to law school. Then after graduating from law school with honors from what is now Texas A&M School of Law, I began using my financial background and legal knowledge to serve my clients. And I'm also a parent. I've been married to my wife, Sherry, for 18 years, and we have a 7-year-old. And I would like to use my financial background, my legal background, and my parenting experience to serve the citizens of this county.
Thank you, Mr. Jarvis. Mrs. Clark.
Good evening. I'm Carol Clark, and I'm judge of the 321st District Court. I've been that judge now. I'm in my 16th year. I am proud to be the judge of this court. It's a highly specialized court. I deal only with family law and family law problems. I have 50% of the regular family law docket, which is private cases, divorces, those kind of things. I have 80% of the Attorney General docket, which deals with non-payment of child support. And I have 100% of the Child Protective Service cases, which involves abused and neglected children who are removed from their homes and placed in the custody of the state. Since I took office in 1999, I've handled over 20,000 of these cases, and nothing but family law. I get about 2,200 per year, and we move as many as we get, so there is no backlog. It's gone up from 1,500, and so that's a trick to keep that moving. Why am I qualified for you to hire me for this job? For 6.5 years, I was a Child Protective Service worker. I have removed children from their homes. I went to law school. I practiced law for 18 years. I am board certified in family law. Less than 1% of our population of lawyers is. Family law is a dysfunctional area. Why? Because the families that come to me are in crisis. I have over 750 hours of special training in dealing with the stress-related issues that the children and the parents I see have. This is very important because we are getting more and more methamphetamine cases all the time, and these cases are clogging up the docket. You have to know how to deal with the stress of the children in order to help them. This job requires very specialized training, very specialized experience, and very specialized knowledge to do it. I have that knowledge as well as the compassion to deal with these families in total distress, but still make them accountable for their consequences. Thank you.
Thank you. Our first question for both candidates. What is your general philosophy regarding how to deal with deadbeat parents who shirk child support duties? Either one may.
Child support is an area very near and dear to my heart. When I practiced family law, I was so frustrated all the time because nothing ever happened. We went to court and nothing ever happened. And nobody paid if I represented the one who was trying to get the money. So what happens? Your society ends up trying to depend on the welfare, to food stamps, to help make up the difference. So I'm very happy to tell you that one of the things I think that happened that I am very, very proud of is in 2002, I worked with the other two judges who handle these cases and the Attorney General's office, and we came up with the Child Support Accountability Program in Smith County just to handle the deadbeat parents. Since 2002, this program has collected for the citizens of Smith County who are owed their child support $48 million from people who never paid their child support before. That is a lot of money. And at what cost to the county? Zero. This is a self-funded program. If you're on probation for not paying your child support, which is the first step, if you come in and you're found not to have a good reason for not paying your child support, you go on probation. Regular probation, and you pay a fee every month. Why do we do that? Because we want to give them some employment opportunities, some skills. Maybe they need drug rehabilitation. Why are they not working? Let's figure that out and let's get them to work. We have currently today almost 1,600 people on probation in my court and in Judge Rogers, who's sitting right there, his court. These people are paying 78% of the child support that is due to the citizens of Smith County. On top of that, we have collected since 2008, when our numbers for this began, $300,000 recouped to the county for attorney's fees for indigent people. They have to pay those back, and for the court costs, which is what Ms. Rogers is back there, what her office, the sheriff, he's somewhere, his office, all the costs that are incurred. These costs are recouped so far, $300,000, and they go back into the coffers of the county. This is a fantastic program. It is now a model for other counties around the state. And in 2008, I was named the National Judge of the Year by a child support organization for my invention of this program.
Well, and I think that I have very little sympathy for the deadbeat dads, but at the same time, I've seen quite a bit of what I consider abuse that comes through this system with this Attorney General program. Right now, in Larry Smith's jail, last I checked, there were about 66 inmates in there just for child support. That's 9.8% of the jail population. You annualize that on their cost, and you're looking at over $1 million for incarcerating these individuals. The biggest complaint, or the biggest thing I think I would change with regard to the deadbeat parents, is the court has what it calls the big budget. And what happens there is once a person gets to the point where they're behind on their child support, they will get put on what they call the big budget. And in that, they are left with $50 a week to live on. That's to pay their rent, buy their food, get to and from work, unless they have to use a bicycle, as is sometimes suggested. And part of it is their own fault, but at the same time, you have to give them the ability to continue their life. If all you're going to do is give them $50 a week to live on, all they're doing is circling the drain. And then sooner or later, they're going to rob Peter to pay Paul, and then they're finally going to give up, and they're going to end up in front of Matt Bingham on a felony case. And once that happens, they typically go to prison. But before that happens, what the court typically does is they'll bring them in, take them off the probation, and put them in jail for 6 months. And that doesn't do anybody any good. It is pure punishment. It punishes the family. It punishes the kids because the mother ends up living on welfare, food stamps, and you're paying for all that while dad sits in jail, or dad or mom sits in jail for that 6 months. There needs to be a program where they're forced to work, or not forced to work, but they're encouraged to work. They can get out of jail to go to work so they're not in jail for 6 flat months, and they can continue to help support their family.
Well, I disagree. Not with his philosophy, but the timing that he's telling you about. They don't go to jail right off the bat. They're put on probation if I find they could pay and didn't pay. That probation is to give them, there are classes on how to get jobs. They give them lists of employers who will hire people. Many of our people have criminal backgrounds, and they can't get jobs in regular places because they can't follow the background check. Additionally, they don't come back before me if they do what they're supposed to do. If they don't do what they're supposed to do, then the probation department files a request to revoke their probation. So only people who refuse to work and pay are put on probation. What is the big budget? For people who are $25,000 or $30,000 behind and they will not pay, their children do not get any money. And the big budget is $100 a week they get to keep. All right? And you know what I tell them? Your kids had to eat all this time. They need to eat now, and you need to catch up. On a motion to revoke probation, if they come up and they have gainful employment and we're able to verify it, we will let them go get out so they can go to work. They have to report to their probation officer sometimes every day or call to make sure they're following what they're supposed to do. I can tell you that 70% of the world pays their child support. We took the 30% that didn't pay and we have winnowed it down to 10. 10% are not going to pay. I had a man last week tell me, this was on a motion to revoke his probation, hey, you can put me in here for 100 years. I am not paying my child support. I want the government to take care of them. And those were his exact words.
And I think that's completely accurate. Some people just refuse to pay, and they will end up in jail. But the ones that have worked, and I've seen it, I've seen the individuals go in there on probation, and the probation officer says, I'm going to try to revoke you. And it's just not fair. If they're trying to work, if they're trying to provide for their family, they don't need to go sit in jail and have us house them for 6 months, up to 6 months, when they should be out working. Because when they're housed, nobody's supporting their kids. Nobody's putting food on that table.
But what you neglect to say is a lot of these people will go work for cash and they won't pay their child support. So if they're working and come see me and they're working and they're not paying, chances are they're going to get revoked if they've been warned and warned. You have to give people consequences. If you don't, word gets around. They're like kids. If you tell your kid, I'm going to count to 10, and then you don't do anything and you count to 10 again, guess what they're going to do? Nothing.
And I think that's right. Some are just not going to pay. Some are going to go work for cash, but they can be told, no, you're not working for cash. You need to go look for a real job, or you're going to start getting incarcerated. And as far as treating them like kids, yes, some of you have to treat like kids. Some of you have to say, okay, this is it. This is the deadline. You need to go get a job or else. But with your child, you give them a chance, and you say, okay, do it, and they don't do it. Yes, you punish them, but punish them with 6 months in jail, and that takes them out of society for 6 months. Meanwhile, nobody's paying for that family other than the taxpayers.
Rarely do they go to jail for 6 months right off the bat. They only go for 6 months if they tell me they want their family to live on welfare. Otherwise, you're just trying to get them to go. All right. Exhausted that one.
May I ask the reverse of this question? Because as a pastor, I deal with family counseling all the time. What happens when you have a situation where you have deadbeat children and you have the CPS involved, and the parents are underrepresented in the court, what do you do in those cases where you have rebellious teenagers who are bringing charges against their parents?
I'm sorry, where the children, okay, the child
Yeah,
protective
we're talking
services-
about deadbeat parents. Well, what about in situations now in the court where our children are learning to use the process to come against their parents, and it's just a matter of normal, natural teenage rebellion against parents. But the system enables the children now to prosecute their parents.
You mean when the children are just making allegations
Yes.
of abuse?
Yes.
I mean, what I've seen, and I've seen a lot of false accusations through the criminal law process. A lot of people say this happened to me when it really didn't. And when children say it, you want to believe them. And typically it will go to CPS and they will investigate it. And sometimes they want to close the case, and sometimes the court says, no, we're not going to close the case, we're going to continue to investigate. I mean, basically when somebody tells a lie, how do you prove it's a lie?
This happens a lot more in custody cases, is where it normally happens. You have a mom and a dad who are fighting. In the cases like you're describing, I have cases, I can have jurisdiction or hear these cases till the children are 18. I have some cases that we call frequent flyers. They come in pretty often. And when they get to be teenagers, they will sometimes say, Dad did something to me, or Mom did something to me, or the parent. Usually it's not the child reporting it, it's the parent calling CPS, and they want to find something to use in their case. Those cases are extremely difficult because you now have CPS coming into the situation, and maybe you have a parent that's encouraging this situation. So what you try to do, and where experience comes in, is you try to ascertain, is that what's going on? And if it is, what do I do about it? Well, generally you start digging a little deeper through the testimony that you hear, and very often what I do is refer them to some very specially trained psychologists that we have here in Tyler, who will help me and the court and the lawyers ferret out what's really going on.
But it is pretty typical to see, once the kids, as savvy as kids are these days, they figure it out. Once they make an allegation, once they can say something that this happened to me, Mom's being mean, I want to live with Dad. It happens. And once they get older, you want to believe them. And at a certain point, the judges can talk to the kids and basically say, okay, what do you want to do? Where do you want to go?
I think if you have that kind of case, you need to get it off this treadmill that we're on of constant litigation, because we know the more these cases are litigated, the worse these kids turn out. Why? It's because of all the stress. I have partnered with a clinical psychologist researcher at TCU. Her name is Dr. Karen Purvis. And I have a lot of specially trained, I've been to training. There's some CPS workers here, lawyers here. We've all been to training to try to ferret out the cause, get it off the treadmill. Because if you don't get those kids off the treadmill, I'm going to have them back as adults.
Thank you very much. Let's move on to the second question. This question is also designed to help us to understand your judicial philosophy. What, if anything, should the legislature do in the 84th legislative session to improve the civil and criminal justice system in the state of Texas? Start with Mr. Jarvis.
Well, the legislature tends to change so much every year. The basics that I see coming before the court that I agree with, the child support issues, the custody issues, the visitation issues are all pretty standard. I don't really see any major change that I would want to make in that. I don't think there's a need to give the judges any more power in these cases, because typically the lawyers, the parties work the cases up, and they bring the case to the judge. And most of the time, for the majority of the cases, the judge just signs off on them. The parties, the attorneys, and all that make the decisions. They typically run the case. It's settled either between them or settled in mediation. So as far as changing that, the criminal aspects I see with the non-support, I think should be changed. Once you get to the point where the district attorneys will file a case against you for criminal non-support, really at that point you're circling the drain. Because once you enter the felony ranks and you get a felony conviction, you're never going to get a decent paying job once you get out, once you get through the system. And you're out there trying to support your kids, you're trying to make a living for yourself, and you're trying to make a better life for you and your kids. And with felony conviction, you just can't do it. I think that the felony non-support probably needs to be eased up, and certainly the district attorney's office here recognizes that, and typically they do offer probation on the majority of those cases because it's about getting the money. It's about getting the money for the kids, and if it doesn't happen through the court and the felony courts come in and take control of it and prosecute them, in the event they end up with a felony conviction, which I think it should be mandatory probation. I think that should be the first thing that comes from a criminal non-support case, because I think it's all about getting the money.
Well, let me just say I handle no criminal cases. So as far as what the criminal non-support, that is completely out of my line. That's handled by the DA's office and the criminal judges. I don't handle those. But let me just say what I think needs to happen. And this is something that I've done in the past. Back in 2007, I was very concerned about the Child Protective Service system in the state of Texas. I went to the legislature. I walked those concrete halls. They're very long, and especially if you have on high heels, they're not very comfortable. I know Ms. Fleming can sympathize with that. To try to bring more local control to that system. It's a huge statewide system. It's big. It has hundreds of thousands of employees. I still am of the mind that that would be better for Texas. I've met on a number of occasions with the commissioners of CPS about that. I think if you could make it more local. I have talked to our local representatives. I have talked to other people's representatives. And so what I discovered when I went to Austin was it's such a big system, and they're such a big agency, and I was just me, that I didn't get very much accomplished. So I came home and I started working on our local system ourselves. Now, we don't control it, of course, but we can do programming and we can do things that make this system work better. Last year, if you read the Dallas Morning News, starting in September, there were articles about the number of children who died in foster care last year. That's because of so many kids coming in, no foster homes, or inadequate foster homes, and there's some workers here who do excellent work with what they have. We need more foster homes for children. So what I've done, and I'm not sure it's something the legislature could do, but what we're doing in Smith County is we have gone to the faith-based community because we believe, Jesus said take care of the orphans and the widows. And we've taken that to heart, and we've been able to grow our system, and we're looking to grow it more. So what I would like the legislature to do is to help, in some way, help the judges and the system to reach out to the faith-based community more and make it easier for the faith-based community to work more with the governmental agencies. There's a lot of government regulations that go into foster care, lots. One of my partners is here tonight. We are exactly trying to do that, to work on foster care. So I have worked with the legislatures. I have to tell you, Senator Eltife has always been very, very good to me. For a while, when I was on my quest, he dedicated a staff member to help me. So there are things we can do. The judges that handle these cases can tell you there are things we need to do about that.
And I think there is a huge bureaucracy there, but there must be some consistency. What we do in Smith County, they might not do in Dallas County, they might not do in Harris County, but I think there has to be some consistency. And as far as the regulations, I think foster care places need to be regulated, because the judge in some county might think, well, I got a friend over here that runs something kind of like foster care, and I'm going to send children over there. If they're not licensed, they're not regulated by the state, I think you're putting children in danger, because you're regulated by the state and licensed by the state for a reason.
You didn't hear me say don't regulate them. That's not what I said, and that's not what I mean. Make it easier for more people to be licensed and bring in people from the faith-based communities, what I said.
And I think those organizations can be state licensed. I think there's one here in Tyler Living Alternatives that is not a licensed foster care.
And that's incorrect.
Are they a licensed foster care?
They are. We have a ruling from the from CPS licensing. We got it last week.
Oh, just last week?
Clarifying. No, it's not that they were licensed last week. It clarifies what I've been doing. And so if you're going to tell them I'm not doing it, that's wrong. That's been the CPS policy for years.
I think the consistency throughout the state, as much as I don't like Austin controlling things, I think that has to have some consistency, because if you're putting a child in foster care in Tyler, Houston, or Dallas, the rules need to be followed, because there has to be consistency, because you're taking a child away from somebody and you're giving them to somebody else, and you need to make sure that those people know the rules and they're doing the right thing.
All agencies are licensed. You can't place children in unlicensed, and I would never advocate that. What I'm advocating is these programs that we've come up with. For example, the drug court program that I'm doing for meth parents. That is something that really helps parents get off meth. It's impossible almost. 50% of the parents we deal with are getting off meth. We've restructured the way these cases are handled. We've got to go faster because we get more of them all the time. In order to do that, we worked with Austin. Austin worked with Washington, D.C. in order to get these cases handled in a more expeditious manner. All we did was take what was already in place and reorganize how the parents were to do their work to get their kids back. We have been able to reduce our caseload from 341 children to last month's 265 children in the custody, all by working with them to reorganize. Those are the kind of programs I think the judge must be innovative, creative, and you're not going to get total consistency when you have judges in every county doing things differently. The basic rules are the same, but how you come, you have to have resources.
And I think the rules have to be the same, because the statutes that the courts follow, that every lawyer follows, is codified by the state. The state tells you what the rules are. And lawyers may not like the rules. We may not like the rules of evidence, rules of civil procedure, or the penal code, but we have to follow them, because everyone has to follow them.
And that's not what I'm saying. I'm talking about programming. I'm not talking about the rules. This is the family code. This is the law. I follow the law. Always follow the law. I think the judge has to be the leader in the programming. I have a new program that's going to go into effect in April. Because of the huge caseload with children that we have had, I have worked with the Bar Association in order to try to reduce the amount of cost that it's costing. They have approved the infant representation program. What that's going to be is, it's going to be kicked off in April. There's training for lawyers who represent children. I'm going to go to the Bar Association, and I'm asking these lawyers in the Bar Association, who may not necessarily be family lawyers, but to be trained and take on one infant representation. One child who is in foster care, who is an infant. I got an infant just, 2 or 3 a week. Most of them are testing positive for meth at birth. That's why I'm getting them.
If I may ask the candidates, what specifically do you feel the 84th legislative session should do then to improve these situations? I hear you describing the situation, but please specifically, what, in your opinions, do you feel the legislature should do?
Well, I've pretty well covered what I think they ought to do. We have plenty of law. They don't need to give us any more, okay?
They make quite a few changes. I mean, yearly the new book comes out. There's training, where you learn what they've changed. And sometimes it works and sometimes it doesn't work.
I can tell you in 1973, when I was a CPS worker, they just came out with the family code. It was this big, half an inch. Now it's this. So I would like for the legislature not to include a whole lot more laws. Let us have the laws. I mean, I don't know of anything that's real broken except for what I told you.
Yeah, I don't assume the legislature not do anything, because sometimes they make good decisions, sometimes they don't.
What I would like for them to do is send money with what they require us to do. It's called unfunded mandates. And they are constantly asking us to do things.
As a pastor, I understand that thoroughly.
Yes. But they won't send us any money to pay for it. And so that I would like for them to pass a law that says you cannot do any unfunded mandates. If you're going to make this county do something, you need to send money. That's what I think needs to happen.
All right, with your permission, we'll move on to the next question. Is that fine?
Sure.
The third question, explain your understanding of the statutory separation of powers at the county level as it pertains to the judiciary and the commissioner's court.
Go ahead, I think I'll go first.
Well, the judiciary is there to resolve the conflicts. The commissioner's court is elected by the county. They set the budgets. They come up with money, and they divide the money out as they see fit amongst the county organizations. They give each court, they give each department a certain amount of money. They set their budget, and the courts typically, or they're supposed to follow those budgets. They don't always follow those budgets. And I think the commissioners and the county judge spend a great amount of time, and they get whatever advice, counseling they need to set the budgets. Because they're spending your money when they take it, and then they give it to the courts. They give it to, they pass it out to the judiciary. They pass it out to the sheriff's department, the constables, as well as the other courthouse services.
The judiciary and the commissioner's court, you have to break it down into the branches of government. We have 3 branches of government. We all learned that in civics class a long time ago. The judiciary is the 3rd branch of government. The commissioner's court sometimes operates as a court, so they would be a 3rd branch, but they're usually under the executive function where they do the budgeting and those sort of things. Sometimes they're in a dual role. The courts are separate from the commissioner's court. They are a different branch of government. They are not in the judiciary. Therein sometimes lies some tension because we are independent. We have to be independent to make good decisions. In a lot of countries, the judiciary is not independent. The executive branch gets to tell them what to do, so they're just little puppets. But in our country, we are separate. Now, one of the problems with the judiciary is we are the 3rd branch of government. We are independent, but we do not generate income to operate on. We have to be funded. The Constitution says we are to be funded to do an adequate job of administration of justice. Again, we're back to the unfunded mandates. The judiciary has to do a lot of things that are unfunded. And the biggest one is, of course, providing lawyers for people who can't afford them. We have to have a staff. My staff is the same staff I've had for 16 years almost. I'm in my 16th year, and I have the same staff, 2. I have a drug court staff who's part-time, but she is revenue neutral to the county because she's funded by my drug court grant. So she doesn't cost anything.
Well,
we have to be funded.
And I think the commissioners certainly have a difficult job because they're taking the taxpayers' money and they're dividing it out. And sometimes the court's budgets go up, and sometimes the court's budgets are abused. And I know that, for the last couple of years, this court has run over budget quite a bit. And the commissioners, they come in and they try to set the rules and they try to say, okay, this is how much money you're going to get to spend. And I know there's been some conflict between the court and the commissioner's court because of the budget overruns. The commissioners had to fund an extra, I believe it was a overrun last year of approximately $444,000, and the commissioners have to take that from somewhere else. And what I think is, or what I see is, it certainly causes conflicts between the court, the commissioner's court, sheriff's department, law enforcement, whoever loses that money. Because either the commissioners are going to have to go tax that money real fast, which is not popular, or they're going to have to go to another big department, which in the past year, the sheriff's department, law enforcement, is the one that was the big loser in that, because they had to take money away from Larry Smith and other constables in order to pay for the attorneys that were used in this court.
From 2002 to 2012, my budget was in the black. Some years was a little up, some years was a little down. And what drives a judge's budget? Pretty much it's indigent defense. Smith County is growing, and as we grow, we're up to 210,000, so is indigent defense. But last year, the year that I went over my budget, I was not revenue neutral like I was for the past decade. We had an unprecedented event. I went from an average of 220 children in foster care. In 4 months, I went from 220 to 341. Each child gets a lawyer from the moment they're removed from their home. I have the contract system. I instituted in 1999. The first year I was there, I saved $50,000. Why? Because the hourly rate, it's cheaper than the hourly rate. Last year, my lawyers on the contract, I have 9 of them, they made $47 an hour. They pay their own overhead, which in the law practice runs 50%, at least when I was a lawyer. So they're making about $25 an hour, but the trade-off is they get the $6,500. So they benefit and the county benefits. As they've gone up, I went from 3 lawyers, I now have 9 lawyers. But the county's population has gone up. So, yes, what I did our budget starts in October. I started noticing this about October, a little bit before. December of 2012, it became critical. We started having meetings about it. My lawyers, CPS, what are we going to do? It looks like it's going up. CPS told me it was a blip. I told them it was not a blip. I was beginning to see grandparents on meth. If the grandparents can't take the children, they have to go into state custody. So what did we do? We started working on this new streamlined system to make the cases move faster. I notified the auditor in March of 2013. My caseload had gone up 30% since October. I told her I felt like it was going up. What was I to do? Would I notify? Who should I notify? She's the one that talks to the commissioners on a weekly basis. She told me she made a report every week. It continued to go up. When I got to 50% in March of 2013, I emailed the commissioners and told them what was going on. I think I'm a good manager. I've always been a good manager. I've always been frugal. Every program I've ever invented either saved money or didn't cost anything. The mediation program that I came up with when I first got there to mediate these CPS cases, it's $25,000 to try one of these cases. We have now solved 90% in mediation since 1999. That has saved $2.1 million. But when the budget went up, I notified them what was happening. We had a tsunami. We went from 220 to 341 in 4 months, 70%.
And I guess I don't think that's all completely accurate, because for year 2009 there was a $53,000 budget overrun. 2011, about a $25,000 overrun. 2012, $120,000 overrun, and then 2013 there was a $447,000 overrun.
Well, from 2002
to
the 2012,
tsunami that she mentions, I believe, was of her own making. When she had these contract attorneys, she had them limited to 40 cases each. When these cases were coming in, she didn't do that. She actually lowered their cases and gave them each a $1,000 raise. This tsunami, if that's how she phrases it or classifies it, could have been handled by increasing the caseload for these 9 contract attorneys that are making $6,500 each. And it's treated as a part-time job, but it could be more. They're making $78,000 a year, and they can handle some more cases. And then from 2012 to 2013, the court received a 26% budget increase to handle this tsunami, received 2 extra attorneys, and they still, even after receiving a 26% budget increase, the court still went over budget $447,000. And that's just unacceptable.
Right. Since I've been on the bench, just here's an example. The insurance for my 2 employees well, 3 counting my court reporter, went up 400%. I mean, just that one number alone, and yes, it went from 220 average to 341. Now, how many cases can a lawyer handle? Let me tell you about these kids. Each child gets this lawyer, okay? That's 341 children. Yes, they were at 40 at that time, 40 cases. Why? Because the kids are in foster care in Dallas, Houston, San Antonio. Most of them are not in Smith County because we don't have enough homes. That's why I've reached out to some of these faith-based organizations to license their homes, get more homes. We've got to have more homes. Yes, my budget, it was in the black for a decade. Some years it was up, some years it was down. It depends on your caseload. I understand that. However, you have to serve the children. I have no choice. That is an unfunded mandate. If you get 341 kids, you got to put them somewhere. Now, they come with parents. You know, in a criminal case, you're lucky. You got 2 lawyers and 2 people. You got the state, you got the defendant. I have cases with 4, 5, and 6 children, and they have 4, 5, and 6 parents. If they're indigent, they all get a lawyer. That's the law. I don't make it, I follow it. I have no money sent to me from anywhere except the county to pay for it.
And I'm all for serving the kids, but the budget for attorney's fees in this court for 2013 was $732,000. The court actually spent $1,176,913 on attorney's fees.
Well, I think we have to look at it.
Any increase in the caseload could have been handled by the 9 contract attorneys she has. When they're limited to 40, and I think now I've talked to Mr. Raddick, and he's upper 50s in these cases, and he's handling them. He should not have been limited to 40 cases, and then the court had to bring in, I believe it was 10 hourly attorneys, and that probably makes up this overrun of $444,000.
And you know what? If you represent criminals, most of them are in the jail. They are not in Houston or Dallas. Do you know the county does not pay their mileage to travel to Houston, Dallas, and San Antonio? They won't pay for a hotel if they had to go, like one of mine to South Texas. She went 500 miles to see her children. She had to make the trip in one day or pay for the hotel herself. So they don't pay for these.
And these attorneys have to go see the kids before a statutory hearing. They don't have to go every month.
At the same time, children were dying in foster care. You know why that was? There was no caseworkers. We went through a period with no caseworkers. You take the facts as you find them. I'm going to protect the children and do the very best I know how.
And I don't think the attorney's fees is going to prevent any kids from dying in foster care. It was clearly overrunning the budget by bringing in 10 extra attorneys that the commissioners had to pay for and then finally stopped paying. The commissioners finally said, that's enough money. And then these 10 attorneys, or most of them, have
Thank you very
sued
much.
the
That's
county.
the time we have on our third question. For our final question, give examples of any efficiencies the judicial system could employ to help the Commissioner's Court save tax dollars. Include ways this court already employs efficiency or cite ways it could be improved, and please be specific.
All right. I think I've already mentioned the first thing that I started was the contract system. I think you would agree $47 an hour is pretty cheap. It's cheaper than any county in our region, which is like 40 counties. $47 an hour is cheap. I instituted the Child Protective Service Mediation Program, as I mentioned, for $97,000 over the last 15 years. We've settled 90% of those cases without a $25,000 trial. So for $1,000, you got $25,000 worth of value. That's over $2 million, or 90%. Again, we've restructured the way we are doing business. We're seeing the results. And yes, there was a lot of negotiation between me and the Commissioner's Court as to how many cases a lawyer could effectively handle. Those cases are being handled with those negotiations that we did. The caseload is down. The lawyers, they're still struggling, but they're making it, and it's, that's done.
Well,
We've got drug court going on. I implemented that about 5 years ago. For every child I can get back home, I'm saving not only money to the foster care system, but I'm saving the society and the county from having to like jail those people. The research says if a child is in foster care when they're 18, there is a 50% chance that they will be in prison, dead, or on drugs within 1 year. So I've instituted that.
And I've already, and
Let me just finish my list. The infant representation program, if I can get some of these infants off of my lawyer's caseload for free. And I've already I approached a bankruptcy lawyer this week, and I talked him into taking an infant. Now, I don't have the program going yet, and he told me I was going to have to train him, and I'm going to give him a mentor, but we're going to save most of our kids anymore are infants. So I believe if I could get 10 or 15 infants, look at the money I could save there. Again, the contract lawyers were saving the county money. If I went back to the hourly rate, the average for the state is anywhere between 60 and 125. So one thing I've talked to the county judge for the last 2 years is a public defender system where the county would employ the lawyers and the office staff and take care of that. Austin just implemented one 2 years ago. They have a model for CPS public defender. It costs $97 an hour. Well, I think 47 is cheaper.
And I guess I don't agree with the $47 an hour because
that's what it is.
I understand that's what it breaks down if they work 40 hours a week every week, but they don't.
No, that's the hours they've turned into me.
I've seen some of the attorneys, and I have the hours reported by these attorneys for the first 5 months of 2013. You know, one attorney reported 630 hours, one attorney reported 300 hours over a 5-month period, yet still got paid $6,500 a month. That doesn't average out to $47 an hour. This attorney is making a lot more than $47 an hour and not doing the work. I do think the contract system is probably a good system because you bring them on, you say these are your cases, whether it's 40 or like Mr. Radican, it's 59 or in the 60s, they're going to do the work because that's their job and that's their duty and that's their obligation. They're on contract, whether they have one case or they have 60 cases, but I think it's the court's responsibility to make sure you fill that attorney up with the cases. If you're going to pay them, then you use them. You don't use them part-time, and you certainly don't use them less than what you should, where you have to bring in 10 extra attorneys and pay them. I believe they were making $100 an hour coming in on an hourly basis. And there was one attorney, I believe it was Mr. Hardy, made $84,000 over a 10-month period. $84,000. You could have put him on contract and saved money. You could have put him on contract, paid him for the full year, and had money left over. That's irresponsible. And just because the commissioners would not authorize another contract attorney, I think that's what the court did. The court came in and said, well, if you're not going to give me another contract attorney, I'll just take one. And she put him out there, she paid him, and then when the commissioner said, well, we're not going to pay you anymore, then these hourly attorneys have sued the county. And now we get to pay an attorney to defend us against the attorneys that we used. It just doesn't make any sense.
We've hassled over this. That was on the last year's budget. We've got it down doing the things that I just told you. Because children must have, and adults must have effective representation. That's the law. And at what point, and that's the disagreement, at what point does it become reversible error and you get to do it over because the lawyer had too many? And there are cases out there that talk about that. We've done it. That was 2 years ago. The budget now is under control because we've done things to make it go faster.
And I guess the question I have on that is, if the attorneys were limited to 40, and that's what the judge thought was appropriate, a number of cases for these attorneys to the point where they're effectively represented, and now these same attorneys are doing 50, 60, or more cases, is the court putting these attorneys in a position where they're giving ineffective assistance of counsel?
The caseload is down. They're down from the 60s to the 50s.
The cases for these attorneys were working in the upper 50s when they were at one point limited to 40, yes. And that caused all these hourly attorneys to come in, and I mean $444,000 of taxpayer money paid out.
All right, then, we will go to the next question. And this is a bonus question. Each candidate will pose a question to the opponent. You have 2 minutes to respond.
Tell me about your CPS experience.
My CPS experience has primarily been in your court. I've had clients that have been brought in for when CPS comes out and says you're not taking proper care of your child was left outside in a diaper, so we're going to put you on a family plan. And I've had cases in your court where...
How many have you had? I haven't seen you.
You have seen me in there.
On CPS cases?
Yes, on CPS
How
cases.
Many? The computer says 2.
I think it's more than 2.
The computer says 2.
And not everyone ended up in front of your court. You know, I've consulted, I've been retained on cases that where I've told clients, no, you are appropriate or you need to go through the family plan. And sometimes I've been in your court on the CPS cases.
All right, Mr. Jarvis, you may ask a question.
My question to you is, how do you see your role as the judge as it relates to CPS? I've heard you say in the past that you and CPS are a team. Is that appropriate?
I say we have team meetings to discuss processes, not cases. And the family code's very clear as to what my role is. Matter of fact, it took me 2 legal pages to write that down, and I've already have that, of what I'm supposed to inquire about in a case. I'm not talking about teams of how you do processes and how cases are going to flow. I think if you don't get together and talk regularly, you're making a really big mistake. Your system won't work. I'm supposed to evaluate such things as, are the psychiatric and psychological evaluations for the child and the parents developmentally correct and appropriate?
And that really wasn't my question. Is
yes,
how do you?
That's my role. I am to review what CPS does.
In some of our past forums, you've said that y'all make a great team.
I'm talking about we do have a team. We meet every Tuesday. It's a managerial team. You can't run a business without teams. All right, that doesn't mean we're all on the same page or we're not adversarial or we're not doing our ethical duties.
Do you see it as an adversarial process? With
you asked me a question. Let me just finish it. All right. I am supposed to evaluate what are the appropriate parenting skills for a parent to have their children returned. That takes knowledge and experience, and I'm to evaluate what CPS is doing. I'm to review that every hearing. Are the parents able to care, nurture, and be appropriate with their child's physical and social development? You have to have knowledge about what child development, how do you review this if you don't know anything about it? You have to review the specific skills that CPS says the parents have to have. Are they appropriate? Are the children on psychotropic medications? That means mental illness medicines. I'm supposed to review those. And what is the emotional and physical needs of the child for now and in the future? And let me just say, my basic job with these kids and any family is to weigh the risk. What is the risk in their home versus not? That is a weighty decision that your experience can tell you. You can't learn on the job. It's not possible. Children are at risk.
Thank you very much. Each candidate will now have 3 minutes for a closing statement, and we will begin with Mrs. Clark.
Thank you so much for your interest. I think it's wonderful that people are interested in what judges do. Most of you never know anything about a judge, so I think it's very good that you've come. And I just want to tell you that I think my race is based on experience, compassion, training, and knowledge. To be a family law judge, you are called upon to be Solomon. You must weigh every case that comes before you, because the gut-wrenching decisions I make are going to change these children's lives forever. I have had to decide such things as, is the child going to be raised by their parents or someone else? How are the children and the parents going to exist with each other after a very litigious divorce, where people really don't like each other very much? What adoptive family is going to become the forever family? How safe is the biological family, and is it safe for the child to go home? How much and what kind of risk to the child and their natural biological family can we tolerate and have a child be safe? What are the consequences for a parent who doesn't work, won't pay their child support after months and months of a probation officer working with them? What consequences does society require? What is it to be an able parent? What does that mean? What does it mean that they're safe? How do you tell a child they can't go home? I've done that. That is not an easy thing to do. Last week I had to tell a child they couldn't have their dog when they asked me for it. So I went to their grandmother and I said, how can we get this dog over to your house? And she said, the dog got run over. I had to tell the child their dog got run over. That was last week. I had a baby Moses case today. That's a case where you can leave your baby or your child at the fire station or the hospital. This baby got left at the hospital. A very seriously brain injured child. That was today. What I'm telling you is this is not the run-of-the-mill kind of court. I am a special court. I am a special person. I have the experience to do it, the time to do it, the knowledge to do it, and the passion to do it. You got to do hard stuff in this court. You don't need to do on-the-job training.
Thank you, Mrs. Clark. Mr. Jarvis, your final 3 minutes.
Thank you. I'd like to start out with just 3 quick comparisons between my opponent and I. First, I have a legal background in family law and in criminal law, and my opponent does not. I have 17 years experience practicing in this court in family law and criminal law, civil law, probate law. I have over 750 family law cases that I've handled. And I think having experience in different facets of law gives me a competitive advantage. Because in the family law court, a lot of cases do deal with drugs, alcohol, abuse, and crime. And don't be fooled to think that criminal law does not come into play in the family law court. Second, I'm a parent and my opponent is not. I've been married for 18 years. My wife and I are raising our 7-year-old. And I just don't think you can fully appreciate the role of a parent in a family law case unless you've been there. And it may or may not be important to you, but I'd like to think that if I ever ended up in a family law court, I would be dealing with a person making a decision that knows what it's like to juggle a child, activities, school, a job, and really trying to pay for all of that. And third, I'm a CPA. I know how to follow a budget. I'm a conservative spender. I don't believe my opponent is. Because I'll give you some facts. Over the last 5 years, as I mentioned earlier, this court's been over budget 4 of those 5 years. And that's a grand total of $645,000. And this is after receiving a 26% increase in the budget, still went over $400,000 plus. And my opponent is really just not taking responsibility. It was mentioned, oh, there was a tsunami. Well, I'll show you the tsunami. These are the cases back to 2011. You can judge for yourself if there's a tsunami there or not. There's copies back here for y'all to get. You can look at and you can see the number of cases that have come through this court since 2011 for foster care. And this is provided on the website for the Texas Department of Family and Protective Services. You can go on the internet and look at it yourself. You know, quite frankly, it's hard to swallow a $640,000 budget overrun when the majority of this county is living paycheck to paycheck. And really what it gets down to, we all take care of our kids, we all take care of our finances. And I think that the courts should have to take care of the same thing. And really at the end of the day, what I see, you never are really lacking money. What you're lacking are ideas. And for these reasons, I'm requesting your vote in the upcoming primary.
Thank you very much. I would like to thank all the candidates for their participation tonight, and thank the audience and the candidates that we did not have to call fire down from heaven, and that we had a civil debate here this evening, which is part of our great country in which we live. And now I turn it back.